Hey everyone, a lot of people have asked me about the T-spin triple, and you know what? I know this is a little late in the game, but a lot of you guys want to know this cool, awesome technique, so we're going to go ahead and teach T-spin triples in this video. So, real quick, we have another slideshow, and first off, why T-spin triple? Well, T-spin triples are really powerful, and they send 6 lines of base damage to your opponent. And this only costs 3 lines of building, whereas in contrast, the Tetris requires 4 lines, but only does 4 lines of damage. So you're incredibly line efficient when you do a T-spin triple. You're doing 2 lines of damage per a line of your own, so it just does a lot of damage. And you look extremely cool when you do it. When you show it to your friends or you're starting to get it, then it's just a really cool technique. That's just really awesome to learn. You learn a lot about the kick mechanics of modern Tetris to see how that T-spin happens. And so, yeah, and they just look cool. That's really nothing much to say beyond that. So the components to a T-spin triple, this is way more complicated than a T-spin double. We're just going to break this down because breaking it down helps, even though it's still going to be slightly complicated after this. So first off, we have to have the initial cavity between the 2 rows. So this is the little gap we see in between the purple T block and the blue block in this particular case. And then we have a 4-row vertical column right next to it. So this, if you see, this kind of forms your T plus an extra space on top, and this allows your T piece to rotate in. So you need 4 rows of, you need 4 full blocks of clearance here, or you can think of it as just like 1 full line piece there. And you need the 5th row ceiling. This is really important so that your piece kicks in. Otherwise, without that piece above in that ceiling, then it's never going to drop in as you try to rotate the T piece in. And then lastly, we need 2 or 3 columns of clearance, and this is just to fit the T piece into that hole before we rotate it. If we don't have this, then the T piece can just never fit. So here are the 5 steps after just breaking down the component. This is probably the easiest way to build one from scratch. And conveniently in the beginning of the game, this is unlike the T-spin double. You can do this in the beginning of the game without any kind of initial setup. And what we really need is to find a flat area that is preferably 4 columns wide. And so here we look in the beginning of the game conveniently, your board's entirely flat. You can do this with 3 columns, but it's a little bit harder. So just in general, find a flat area that's 4 columns wide is the most ideal here. And then from here, we form the cavity, and this is the little hole that we have. And the easiest way you can do this is with a J or L piece plus a T block, and this is like the way that you can get that setup that we saw in the first slide. And then after we get this set up, and technically you don't have to do this in order, but it's usually a little bit easier in cases like this to do this side first. You fill in the rest of the row, but you make sure that you have that familiar gap, that 1 extra column. And then from there, we leave clearance for the T piece. We create the ceiling, and in this case, we're just using a square block. But if you're already set up, then you can use a variety of pieces to do this. And so once you get this set up, then you can move your T piece in. You have to slide it into that little nook, as you see on this top left, right here. And then in this particular case, a lot of people ask me about rotations. You would use the counterclockwise button for this left side, and this will allow the piece to kick in. And this is where the ceiling of that top yellow block becomes important, because without that, it wouldn't allow the kick to happen. And then conversely, we're going to just move myself right here. If you're doing it on this side, then you need to kick the clockwise button, or it's usually the right side button if you're pressing a different button, and this will kick it in. So that's the basic premise of the T-spin triple. Overall, it's a little bit more complicated, so there's not really a full easy way to do it. What I just recommend is you just go step by step. You create the cavity, you create the 4 lines of the 4 blocks of clearance, and then you create the ceiling on top, and then you put the T piece in. There's not really too many shortcuts here, unfortunately, like the T-spin double is just overall a much harder technique to learn. So some little tactical, first off, there is a little bit of rules that also come with it, just showing you how complicated it can be. So first off, when you rotate, so I mentioned that you have to have either 3 or 2 lines of clearance. If you have 3, it's better, so you can just slide your piece in directly. But let's say we look at this very right example where we have this T block here. We have to press the rotation button twice to get it in, and in this particular step on the very right, it'll still work. You just have to press the left rotate button, the counterclockwise rotate button twice, and it'll slide into this little nook. In the case of the very left, where we have the larger clearance, then you just need to press it once. But there is a unique case where if you only have one of these yellow blocks on the side, unfortunately, because you actually need this block above it, like you see here, it will not kick in. Instead, it will just get stuck. It will just get stuck outside this little cranny, and you're never going to fit it in. So keep in mind, it's either you have nothing in that very left column, or you have 2 blocks here, so it kicks in. And so I don't want to really go too much into the mechanics, but just remember you need to have 2 blocks of clearance here. There's some tactical setups I want to mention to create the first initial cavity. So if you see something like this on your board, then you can just put something above it to create the roof. But it needs to be very specific. There's many pieces on top that won't work. So if you put a square here, it's not going to work. And if you play enough, you'll see why later. If you have like a simple block right here, then you can just add a piece here and you create that little familiar cavity setting here, and then you can fill the rest out. So pretty much, if you want a little bit simplified way, you're looking to create this little Pac-Man kind of thing. Look at this like familiar 5-block setup. And then you want to ideally have 2 empty columns in front so that you can create the other side and you can fill it in like this. So we're going to go back. So you want this setup, and then you want to create this. Now keep in mind you don't want anything above these purple blocks, or else you can't put the T piece in. So overall, a lot of restraints, but I'll do my best to explain in a match more in detail. So hopefully we're going to put these notes into a PowerPoint that you guys can review so that you can help remember. Alternatively, you can go to Hard Drop for setups. And we're going to go into a game and go over just kind of looking for it. Again, it's not as familiar of a space as T-spin doubles, which can be done more fluidly. And in addition, it does kind of mess up your board a bit, because for a lot of the T-spin setups, you have to use a lot of the L, J, and T pieces. And so meaning you're frequently going to be left with a lot of the not so good pieces. And so it's going to be really hard to build in general. So we're going to do it here. So we have this first block here, which we're going to use as our base. We're going to try our best to form the cavity. We're going to sacrifice. So we create the cavity here, and that's the first step. And then we're going to fill in the rest. And then we're going to need the ceiling, which we're going to use the square block for. And that's the base setup of a T-spin triple. So we're going to look for it again. I don't really have a base to work with, so we're just going to play until we get to a point where a base is familiar. So we see this on the right side now. So I'm going to go ahead and create this familiar little cavity. And of course, we're a little bit higher. So we're going to have to play around with this. And overall, like, T-spin triples are fun, but they are very demanding on your board. So we filled in the rest of the rows, and then we just got to create our overhang here. And that's another setup. You can put a line piece here, and we have a 2 column gap. So what we do is you just rotate it twice, and that's how you get the T-spin triple setup. We do have a plat setup here, and we can actually do a tactical setup where we have this Pac-Man thing with the green and the orange block. So that's what we're gonna do. And then we gotta create the roof, and you can use a combination of things. So I'm gonna use this piece and this piece to do it. And if I were to use the T block here, it would not rotate. I need to add one more row so that it kicks in. If we didn't do that, then unfortunately it would not rotate. So we now have a flat setup on the right or left. So we're gonna do the same thing once again. And then we can create the roof all in one step with this. So generally speaking, L and J blocks, the longer pieces, are really good to create these setups. So Again, we worked with that, we created another one. We're going to use this line piece to create another one. So we're going to create our own flat board. So again, like you have a lot of difficulties to deal with in working with these because you have to sacrifice so much of your board to make it work. Because it's really hard to explain, but like your board has to be super accommodating, and the remaining pieces you have left are frequently going to be not so good pieces. So you end up having to build really high uneven stacks as a result very often. So that's why a lot of, like, when you look at really good players, we'll go for it sometimes if it's easy on the build, but it's not something we're necessarily going to overextend for. So again, we have this flat board on the left. We're going to work around this. I have to cycle through a lot of blocks to create this. And again, so we create this little cavity Pac-Man piece here. We're going to fill in the other side, and then we're going to create our roof. And that's how you do it. It's going to take a lot of repetition. So again, we have this flat we can work with. And you can see my board's in a pretty rough spot. And keep in mind, to get the T-spin triple, like, the rest of the board has to be filled out, or else you only get a T-spin double here. So it's just overall rough, and you see that by only going for T-spin triples, it just really leaves your board a mess. So there is a trade-off. You can get it a lot of times, but it does come at a price. So don't get overzealous doing it unless you're just trying to practice and work on the setup, because there are just situations where you should just not go for it. And even if you're building really fast and you recognize the pattern of a T-spin triple, sometimes it's just better to go for the T-spin double and have a cleaner board. So those are just like some of the different things to just consider. Here's another tactical setup we're just going to do here. We're going to create the little lip, and we're going to rotate. And then I actually messed this up, so a little tricky. I'm probably dead here, but hopefully this example, gives you guys some ideas on what to do. Again, it's just repetition, and then over time you begin to recognize setups to create that little Pac-Man thing that I keep talking about. And then you just get quicker at doing the Pac-Man, into filling in the rest of the row, into filling the roof, and then you get it quicker just with practice. But keep in mind, it is way harder to do than a T-spin double consistently, and it also messes up your board more. So if you want to learn it, be intentional. By all means, practice as hard as you can to force as many T-spin doubles into your setup, but then also begin to realize as you begin to play with these setups, like when it's appropriate to and when it's not. So hopefully that's a really good start for you guys. Unfortunately, it's not that easy, but hopefully that takes you a step further in your game. Thanks for watching, guys.